There we go. Coalition Purple back on the air in rainy San Diego.
Good to see you, Bill. Yeah.
Finally.
And rainy and, relatively cold. I mean, I think they're having a blizzard out in Maine, I heard, so I shouldn't be complaining too much, but let's say a little colder and a little wetter than it usually is.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's sad. You're living a weird life when it's, I don't know, it's probably like 60 degrees and I've got my down jacket on inside the house. It's like, oh, that's sad. That's really sad.
Yeah, it's all you're used to, I guess.
Yeah. So anyways, what's going on out in the world of wild third-party politics?
Well, I don't know if there's so much going on in third-party politics today, which is a weird thing for me to say because I'm pretty much always about third parties. But there are a few things that caught my attention that I thought were extremely important to bring up. Two things specifically that I think really hit home with everyone and need to be talked about a lot more. The first one being that we may not need to use paper straws anymore, thanks to Donald Trump. Now, I cannot tell you how much I hate paper straws. I mean, it's like I hate straws generally, and generally try not to use straws. Oh my God, I hate paper straws with such a passion. I can't even tell you.
I think that is the one topic that most people generally will agree with Trump on. That was like a no-brainer, man.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, crazy. Thank God we finally can go back to just having a regular, old, average, ordinary straw. I fully recommend that unless you absolutely need the straw, don't use the straw. It is a waste of plastic. Some beverages require a straw, and when a beverage requires a straw, it cannot be paper.
I know. Well, it was so funny when those bans really started popping up. That was such a big deal in the food world that I deal with. And so they were coming out with all these other alternatives, right? So, stainless steel straws, wood straws that are made out of different grains that they've formulated, kinds of things and all this kind of stuff. And it's one of those things where it's like, that old plastic straw is really hard to beat. But to your point, it's like at the end of the day, that it is kind of a total waste, and and it is bad for the environment. Although, as environmental things go, that's got to be pretty low on the list. I mean, it was an easy one to get rid of.
Yeah.
But when you look at things like the plastic bags in grocery stores, and I can't remember if we ever talked about this, but California did the plastic bag ban.
So
and what they discovered, and so you have to pay for your plastic bags that are more heavy duty. But those heavy duty bags can't be recycled. The way the plastic is made. So and nobody really recycles them anyway. So now they actually created a bigger problem through these bags, and I think they're talking about going back to mandating paper bags.
So I know it's crazy. They got rid of the paper bag. What are you can't have them at all. And then you have to use plastic bags, and now it's back to paper bags. I mean, because we hear about these. In a way, that's a perfect microcosm to this sort of reflexive, unthinking way that we deal with climate change and environmental impacts on things anyway. So it's kind of crazy. But I would just up on the recycling thing. I've heard that only something like 5% of plastics get recycled, or it's a really small percentage. So it's
very
really
small.
Kind of sad.
Yeah, it's very small, and then most people don't do it anyways. But that's the crazy part. I mean, that's a cultural issue. I think we all need to. I think Europe's done a much better job on that, where they get society to sort of buy into it. But here, it's just, man, it is hard to get people to kind of buck up to that. But but I think the straw one was really funny, though, because it's like, of all the things, that people can agree on, that one about paper straws is top of the list.
I have to admit, I'll always remember my first time I went to a Starbucks after the ban, and I got a paper straw. So I get a coffee, and I usually get a frap, and that's the reason I use this. That's the reason I drink out of a straw, because if you try and drink a frap out of a cup, the whole thing just pours onto your face, and it's a mess. So you kind of need the straw. So it's like I get the straw, And I'm like, oh, it's a paper straw. I'm like, oh, I heard about this in the news. It's something about blah, blah. But, okay, whatever. It's fine. I'll use the paper straw. So a frap obviously is very cold and it's very thick. So I'm trying to suck it through this paper straw. And the first thing that the straw just collapses.
Yes.
And I'm like, what is going on? So I pull the straw out, which is wet, and I'm trying to like pinch it.
Yeah, reform it, right?
And I notice as I'm pinching it, it's getting like more and more like goo. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll try it one more time. Put it back in there. And I try and suck, and I can't get anything out. So I try and stir it up to maybe weaken the the ice a little bit so it starts to melt, so it's maybe more liquid. And the straw rips in half. And I'm like, so I pull out the half of the straw that I have, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I just put a whole bunch of paper, and then it's not just paper; it's like glue and paste, and however they fold this thing. And this is now dissolving into
your straw, or to your drink, yeah.
And the worst thing is that I'm a complete caffeine addict. I'm totally addicted to coffee and any kind of caffeine.
I know.
So now I have a drink with a straw in it and half a straw.
You're hitting on things.
So I go for the half a straw suck because it's really close to the top, and it's hopeless. Now it's melting in my mouth and it's all over the place. So I discard that, and I'm
involved in determining
against better judgment. I will try and drink this. So I tip it back, and what does it happen? A huge clump of
judges that make the ultimate
frap just comes right into my face. It's like, you've got to be kidding. And so I basically just sat around and waited for it to melt.
Reform or how we do things.
So that sticks in my mind with paper straws forever.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think we've all had those. It's just experiences. It's just crazy. Anyway, so what's number 2?
Oh, number 2, also incredibly important and be hugely impacting on people, and it's that Trump wants to get rid of the pennies.
Yes,
and
another one we can all agree on.
No. I'm concerned. I have concerns about getting rid of the pennies, and I
can't believe that.
It's because of the taxes. So, like for me, I pay for almost everything electronically, and this is the big thing that everyone says, that because everybody pays for everything electronically now, you really don't need pennies for anything.
Right.
But there are a certain number of people that will try and pay for things in cash, and then how do you calculate change? I mean, are they going to mandate that like everything gets rolled up to the nearest nickel? Or
yeah, I think so.
Will it be?
I think it's I think that is the plan, as I understand it.
I just don't know. Before I can endorse pennies going away, I must hear the plan for how we're going to do our rounding. Do you round up or down, like normal rounding? If it's like greater than 0.5, it rounds up. If it's less than 0.5, it rolls down. Because then it should kind of balance out, and everything would basically be fair. Okay. But if you always round up, you're talking about creating essentially a tax of like, I don't know, on an average like 2.5% or something like that.
Right.
Because, if something costs, $1 and change in something, and that penny has to get rounded up to, the next 5.
The next 5 cents,
an extra 4 cents. But other times it might be exact, or, maybe it doesn't matter. So as I say, I'm very concerned for the American population and the greater world at large, that if we have not hammered out exactly how we're going to do our rounding before we eliminate the penny, it could result in global chaos.
So does Texas have...
Well, 2 things there. Sorry, one, I think Canada has already done this like years ago, right?
Because in California, we often
so
judges.
Canada is still standing,
so hard to know,
at least for now, until they become the 51st state.
So I'm curious.
Right. So that's one, but I think the big
maybe Canada and Mexico can figure out how to get around the tariffs by somehow doing some kind of weird rounding error with all the pennies.
Yeah, right. There you go. And then the other part is, I think the big issue with the whole penny thing is, with the school system the way it is, I don't think people younger than us are going to figure out how to round down or up.
Yeah, another potential, groundbreaking problem there.
It's like trying to make change. If and I'm not critical. I really am not trying to criticize younger people, because if you've never had to do whatever it is, how are you expected to know, right? But when we were growing up, you just had to know how to make change for stuff and all that, because you didn't really have a digital world at that point, right? So we learned that, but today, why would you need to really learn that, right?
Yeah, who knows? The other thing is, like things like the 99-cent store, gone.
Yeah,
gone. Think about the enormous blow to our economy when all the 99-cent stores and 98-cent stores are gone, or what
Yeah.
it will cost the population if they all become dollar stores. That's a 1% tax right there.
There you go. Exactly. Well, yeah, and just the fact that so much advertising is based on 99 cents or 4.99 or
I know
3.99. Everything gets all
costs
screwed up.
$3.99.
Yeah, everything gets screwed up because you can't do the 99 thing anymore. Because
Yeah.
4.99 is so much less than 5, and it motivates
Right.
behavior.
Well, maybe what we should do is start a crusade here to make sure that everything that was once 99 cents or something 99 cents, instead of going to the dollar, it goes to 95 cents. And then we get a huge economic boost, and we all
Benefit.
get this huge discount, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Now we're thinking.
Yeah, because the thing is, I'm normally against big government, but when it comes to things like mandating it should go from 99 to 95, that's where big government really can stick it to them.
Yeah. No, those two had caught my eye too. It's been a big week for making the government more efficient and cost effective. So
yeah, well,
those are the start.
The truth of the matter is, I do actually have a third one that's actually serious, and
Okay.
so I mean, I guess I'll go on to that one too.
Yeah.
So the next thing is that we're apparently in a constitutional crisis because the Trump administration is arguing with things in the courts, which I don't necessarily think necessarily arises to a constitutional crisis. But the thing that gets me about it, and this goes back to me thinking about things like long ago, is that what the courts are trying to do right now is they're trying to say that Trump can't do certain things entirely within the executive branch. So,
Right.
like, if Trump is the head of the executive branch because he is the executive, and he wants to fire an executive employee, that is essentially all internal to the functionings of the executive branch. And now the courts are coming in and saying we're going to dictate how the executive branch functions, and I don't necessarily think they can do that. I think that could even be considered an unlawful order and maybe something that Trump wouldn't follow. But that gets me to sort of what the next thing is. In both the executive branch and the legislative branch, there are internal mechanisms for sort of reining in bad employees.
Mm-hmm.
But in the judicial branch, as far as I know, or as far as I've ever seen, there is no mechanism for reining in bad employees.
Other than impeachment.
Right, but the impeachment has to take place in the legislative branch.
Yeah.
Right, there's no internal
sort of another
mechanism within the judicial branch to say, hey, wait a minute, there's a judge out in some place that
jails and the prisons are
rules
so crowded,
over and over and over again and gets constantly overturned and is obviously biased and is obviously taking a political position. Judges have there's a code of judicial ethics.
So
right.
I'm wondering,
part of this is that you're supposed to be unbiased and give
prison
people a
space
fair chance, and you're not supposed to
an
do
issue,
X
or
and
is that
Y.
more like a red herring?
But if a judge just blatantly ignores all of that code of ethics, what happens to the judge? Absolutely nothing, as far as I can tell.
Oh.
So one of the things that I've always thought is that within the judicial branch, there needs to be some mechanism by which there can be a review of a judge. So, like, let's say a judge does X, and that affects me. I then sue the judge and say, okay, I think what you just ordered me to do is illegal, and I don't think you're upholding the good behavior that a judge is supposed to uphold and is constitutionally required of a federal judge to act with good behavior. And so I'm going to sue you and petition to have you removed from the bench. So then this thing eventually goes up to the appeals court and then eventually to the Supreme Court, whoever decides to appeal what. And there should be some mechanism where if everybody looks at this, especially if the Supreme Court looks at it and says, you know what? Not only was this order you issued not lawful, but you've authored many unlawful orders.
Mm-hmm.
So we're removing you from the bench because you're not conducting yourself in a manner commensurate with your constitutional responsibilities. And it just has always bugged me that within the judicial branch there seems to be no mechanism for disciplining any kind of rogue judges.
Yeah, and I've never really studied it that closely. I know when the whole issue came up within the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court really there's absolutely no, ethics or whatever that
Right.
supposedly they could get bounced for, unless you go to this point of impeachment.
Right.
And everybody kept saying, but even in the lower courts, they do have a set of rules that they can absolutely not do this, this, and this, that the Supreme Court doesn't even have to abide by. So I don't know, and I don't know the details of that, to be honest with you. But the only prospect really is any kind of impeachment, I guess. And number two is if they do make bad judgments or illegal judgments.
Yeah.
I mean, the appellant process is the process.
But the thing is,
I understand you're trying to get rid of the repetitive nature of these judges that are purely biased in one way, shape, or form, and that sort of thing.
They also say that the process is the prosecution, right? So if you have a judge that can just rule whatever, and that judge is more or less in the pocket of some faction, they can just keep going back to that judge over and over and over again and get endless numbers of ruling. Because I was thinking about the number of suits that have been filed against the Trump and his regime at the moment, and they're up to I think I heard somewhere they're up to 50. And so,
I'm sure.
If you can just say, look, we don't like this person, and we're going to file 10,000 claims against him, and we have this judge that will just rubber stamp everything going forward. And it's the same way with judges, rubber stamping warrants or rubber stamping anything else. It's so you have people that are doing things that you can objectively look at and say, well, the judge shouldn't be doing this. It's no basis in the law. It doesn't make any sense. He's obviously doing it for partisan reasons. The reason he's the judge on the case is because the partisans who wanted something done went judge shopping. And don't get me wrong, Republicans and Democrats both use it. I'm just using the
absolutely
what's going on right now. But if you've got this guy in there who's a rubber stamp for unwarranted political persecution, well, I mean, if he has to be impeached, then it's a whole thing where he has to go to the legislature, and he can theoretically only be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. If he just makes bad rulings all the time, and he's just not capable of doing his job, he's totally incompetent. Because it's one thing if the local dog catcher is incompetent, but if a federal judge is totally incompetent and just makes nonsensical rulings all the time, I mean, that's a disaster. There should be some mechanism within the judicial branch to, rein that in. And again, since we're doing this and we're going to put it out in the world, look, if I'm missing something because I'm not a lawyer and somebody knows something, please post it.
Comment. Yeah, for sure.
Tell us, how this works. I'd love to know if there is a mechanism that I haven't seen. But to me, it's just crazy. Because, I mean, if somebody's really out of line in the executive branch, well, in theory, Trump can just fire him. So there is a mechanism for removing people in the executive branch. I know that, Congress people can be, moved around. And, I'm trying to remember. there are cases, if I'm remembering correctly, where members of Congress have been expelled from Congress by Congress. And so Congress has a mechanism, and at the very least, Congress has the impeachment mechanism. So theoretically, Congress, the legislative branch can impeach anyone, including its own members. So that's internal. But to me, I don't see any internal enforcement of anything from the judicial branch when people are completely incompetent or completely corrupt.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of layer on that, I think part of it too is we have become such a litigious society as well. Mm-hmm. Because you want the courts there to be that objective decision maker when it is a jump ball, right? You need that. Absolutely. But, I kind of look at it, the flip side of it too, is on the frivolous lawsuit stuff. That happens all the time. The one I just happened to see today or yesterday, the one that Trump had sued Twitter over taking him off the platform back when he was all before Elon bought it.
Yeah.
So they removed him from Twitter. He sued, and now he's back on the platform. But they've settled out of court for $10 million. Right. So it's like, and so it's like, well, that's an interesting timing on that settlement with Elon in there. But the thing that I always found fascinating by that particular lawsuit was Twitter is a private company. You have any right you want. And that's why I have that issue with all the social media. As much as I frankly hate social media, they are private companies in terms of what they can do and not do. And so to force them to have any particular rules, well, I mean, unless they're doing something truly illegal, like laundering money through their thing or something.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be able to do what they want, even though I think it's just awful for society. And I would hope that they would stand up and actually put some decorum in the process. But legally, they have no responsibility to do that.
Yeah, there's sort of two things. There's two tracks in my mind when I hear you talk about that. The first one is that I agree that frivolous lawsuits are sort of a problem, and we should have tort reform. I've also always strongly believed in loser pays. Like if you bring a completely frivolous lawsuit and they just throw it out, well, you should pay my legal fees.
Yep.
And I've been involved in several lawsuits, and one of the things you can always do too is you can countersue whoever sues you for legal fees. So I have actually won legal fees in court cases before, and I know that that's something that I always look to. So I think there's some definite tort reform that could go on there. Yep. But as far as the judges go, it's really like a judge shopping thing. That's my main concern.
It is.
Because you know that they always and I'm just using the Democrats for example again, just because it's top of my mind.
Why not?
Talking about the complexity
they always try and get all their cases, if they can, in the Ninth Circuit.
State of politics.
Yes. So why do they always try and get it in the Ninth Circuit? Why do I even know what the Ninth Circuit is, aside from the fact that I'm actually in California? It's because
remove
the Ninth Circuit
and empower judges
almost
to have
100% of the time
and go
rules
case by case.
with whatever the Democrats want them to rule. But they're also the most overturned court by the Supreme Court of any of the courts.
Forces them down the road.
Yeah, so it's like
stricter.
If you've got all these judges, which people are using for judge shopping, and they're constantly getting overturned, there should be some sort of judicial review within the judicial branch to say, wait a minute, the rulings you're making are nonsense. I mean, they're not even justified. And if that's the case, there should be some ability to discipline.
Yeah.
And as far as the Supreme Court goes, it's like whoever's at the top of the food chain, largely is going to be immune from things because they're at the top of the food chain. Who goes after the top dog? And that's where impeachment comes in. So I think you can impeach a Supreme Court justice, and you can impeach.
You can. It's very difficult, but you can.
Yeah, but
but again, and with the particularly Supreme Court, I still think, generally speaking, the solution there is term limits. To some degree, because just like the executive branch has term limits, the legislature should have term limits. I think that's one of our biggest problems within the whole system is they really don't have term limits. So they can be there for literally 40, 50 years, some of them.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And, so I think everybody really should be subject to term limits.
I think another good thing about term limits that doesn't get talked about enough is that if you don't want career politicians, and then don't make it possible to have a career as a politician. You can serve as a politician for a period of time, do something productive, hopefully, but you can't be like, okay, now that I'm elected, I'm permanently here, and so I'll just make all my stock trades and I'll get rich.
Right.
I'll just do it forever. And so it's like, okay, that's yet another reason why I think term limits would make a lot of sense.
No, absolutely. And and unfortunately, the judicial system has become so politicized as well that I think it's even more important that we figure out some way to do term limits with them too, just because and I get it. To some degree, I understand everything. As long as you have two people involved, politics are going to come up. I don't care what the topic is, right? To some degree. And so, we just have to admit that when it comes to the judiciary. So, It's crazy.
It's one of those things too, where it's like you're supposed to get this appointment for life because you feel like you're outside of the fray of normal political influence, right? And you've got it. You're there. You're going to stay there. You don't have to worry about it. So you can just make good decisions. But at the same time, it also means that you're permanently insulated from any of the consequences of your actions.
Exactly.
So if you're for a person who wants to be just an a-hole, you can just, constantly be an a-hole for the rest of your life, and there's no consequences for it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a crazy thing, but I just have always, it's just because it's coming up now, but I've always been confused by that. Why doesn't the Supreme Court have the ability to review the judges that are in the lower courts to say, wait a minute, this person is doing all kinds of crazy things. We need to take a look at what this person is actually doing. But as far as I know, that doesn't ever happen.
Well, they're probably too busy. They got so many cases. Part of it is they're just literally too busy because they got so many things they turn away so many cases already compared to the ones they accept, just because they're either not really that significant, or they're just, we've kind of ruled similarly on something else. And so I get it. Everybody ultimately wants to go to the Supreme Court, but really very few cases ever do make it there.
Yeah, but the other thing you do is you could essentially produce or create a judicial review court.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be the Supreme Court. And its sole job would be to, if there were cases of judges acting in bad faith and not upholding their constitutional oath,
right,
could go before a tribunal, and the tribunal could be like, yeah, you know what, you really were doing a crap job, and you really weren't holding up your oath, and you really were biased, and you really were issuing illegal orders, so see you later.
Right.
But again, things like that would take an act of Congress, and there's obviously a lot of complexity to it, but I feel my point still stands, which is there should be some internal review capability within the judicial branch.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And it almost seems like it's fitting. It used to happen within actually the executive branch, that you sort of had that unbiased review of departments through the whole, what do you call them, solicitor generals. Yeah. But now that's kind of starting to go out and that started even before Trump, where there's, the independence of having that office that sits out there and really looks at, okay, is this legit or not from a department standpoint? That's now become sort of definitely very much I'm sure it was always political, but it's really become a political thing, where every president's going to come in and just annihilate anybody that they don't like, the way they're reviewing it. And it's like, because I don't think anybody will disagree that there isn't waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government.
Oh yeah,
it's just too big, right? I don't see how anybody can legitimately disagree with that. But you also got to make sure that we're looking at it fair-mindedly, and we're not looking at it, just because you don't like something, or that
there's so many issues
Congress has actually, mandated something, and now the executive says, "Well, we're just not going to do it." And so it's all part of this, which is for me is overall sad. Just this is why there's no trust anymore,
or even the ability to
in
change
any level.
directions when it's
in a way, I find it sad, but in another way, I almost find it hopeful, because at least it seems how these things are now coming up. Maybe there can be some kind of progress. Because again, it was funny looking at the,
as I say, what I'm
the
hearing
temporary
from you,
restraining order, I guess is what they're calling,
right?
And that the court issued against the Trump administration would have restricted the Secretary of the Treasury, the head of the Treasury Department, from looking at Treasury Department records.
Education,
and it's like, that doesn't work. And if that judge can just sit there and reissue that order every other day, or you can bounce around between different judges,
the desperation of people
saying that the executive branch can no longer access its own records. It's like that just doesn't work. It's crazy. And so at some point,
in a way that's fair,
there just has to be some conclusion reached about what are these universal injunction things really capable of, because you also, as I say, you don't want to neuter the Justice Department, But I think one of the things that I sort of thought about was that if the executive branch is doing something that affects something outside of the executive branch, it's not entirely internal, then the courts, are the arbiters of that case, right?
Right.
So, like, if it was sort of one of the things about student loan reimbursement. So Biden wanted
Yeah.
to do student loan reimbursement, and the court said you can't do that. It's not legal. You don't
Yes.
have the power or discretion to do it. But that affected outside the executive branch
Right.
because it was
Yep.
affecting the laws that were passed by Congress, but it was also affecting every person that had a student loan. So it wasn't an internal executive function.
Yeah.
But when the suit says, "Look, Trump can't pause spending
Yeah.
because I'm filing this injunction," I mean, what if Trump comes across, $1 billion going directly to the Ku Klux Klan,
Right.
and now he can't stop that payment because some judge in somewhere said, "Well, the executive branch can't even look or think
Yeah.
about or do anything in regards to where it spends the money or how it does it." I mean, I don't know what the resolution of it will all be, but I think it's good that we're at least looking at it because I mean, it kind of doesn't make any sense.
Oh no, I think the review is good. I think it was more of a matter of the way in which it's being done, right? It's like, well, if you stop everything, that's not necessarily productive. In your example, hey, we happen to cover the fact that the Ku Klux Klan is getting all this money. I don't think anybody's going to argue about stopping that, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just all the chaos that's going on. But we could go talk about that for the next 3 hours about what's happened.
Well, the thing is, here's the good news. It'll still be going on next week.
Exactly. No question about it. It's not going anywhere fast, for sure. So, yeah, no. Anyways, hey, that was good. That was, but we probably should wrap it up here. But I never knew where this one was going to go. But I'm certainly glad we've got the straw and the penny situation.
Thank
We're
God.
starting to sort that out. So the country's getting back on track.
Yep. What it says on our currency is "God bless America," and
That's right.
When it comes to those two issues, that's all I can say. God bless America.
All right, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye.